So sometimes I wonder how certain places or things get their names. For example, spatula or Timpanogos. When I was a little girl, my grandpa told me a story about how a certain rock got its name. I was about 8 years old and my parents were going on vacation, so they dropped me and my twin sister off at my grandparents' house to stay with them. We always loved going to Grandma and Grandpa Lyon's house because we would have lots of adventures. One particular adventure that we had planned was a bike ride to Parley's Canyon. I can remember waking up early that morning and having silver dollar pancakes, which was my grandpa's specialty, and eggs and bacon and a tall glass of orange juice. My sister and I had an eating contest to see who could eat the most pancakes. And I don't remember for sure who won, but just for the story's sake, we're going to pretend that I won. So after breakfast, me and my sister helped Grandma clean up and then pack up lunches for our trip. And Grandpa went out into the garage to make sure that our bikes were in tip-top shape. He put air in the tires, made sure everything was tight, and made sure that the brakes were working so we didn't get hurt. Once everything was ready, we put on our helmets, we filled up our water bottles, and we set off with Grandpa in the lead and Grandma following behind in the car with our lunches. Now that was a really long bike ride for two little girls who were only about 8 years old, but we finally made it to our destination, which was Suicide Rock. Now we parked our bikes, and while we were eating our lunch, Grandpa told us a story about how Suicide Rock got its name. One of the first sights that caught the eye of the early settlers when they came into Parley's Canyon was a huge red rock that was made mostly out of red sandstone. And it stood right at the mouth of the canyon. Now this rock stood there for hundreds of years as a watchtower for the Indians. So the legend goes that a beautiful young maiden fell in love with a hunter and wanted to marry him, but her father, who is the chief, didn't approve. And he had arranged for her to marry somebody else. So the young girl refused because she was so in love with the hunter. And because of that refusal, the chief and the strong man that she was supposed to marry had plotted a murder to murder the hunter so that she had no other choice but to marry the other man. So one night, the chief and the strong man pulled the hunter out of his tent, dragged him into the woods, and killed him and buried him in the woods. And the next few days were really, really hard for this young maiden. She was really worried about her hunter. She didn't know where he had gone, and she had this horrible feeling that something bad had happened to him. So that night she decided to go into the woods and ask the spirits what had happened to her hunter. She built a fire, she asked her question, and then she waited quietly for an answer. And not long after that, the flames began to dance and flicker, and they turned from a bright orange color to a glowing blue color. The young maiden looked into the flames, and her eyes widened when images began to appear. And she saw her father and the strong man, and she saw everything that they had done, from plotting the murder to burying the man's body. So the young maiden was so heartbroken and devastated that she went to the watchtower and she climbed to the top, and she jumped off to her death so that she could rejoin her true love in the spirit world. The next morning, the chief found her body at the bottom of the watchtower, and from then on, it was referred to as Suicide Rock. Now this is also the place where my grandpa proposed to my grandma. He brought her there, he told her the story of the young maiden, and then he said, "If you say no to my proposal, then I will jump off." And so, of course, she said yes, and they lived happily until the day that he died. And so today's Suicide Rock has been blocked off from climbers due to its steep drop, and also due to teens climbing up to the top and defacing it with graffiti. I will always remember that long bike ride, and how a huge rock was named after the actions of a love-stricken Indian maiden. The end. Oh.